every Michael Jackson documentary eventually shows you the same thing. 2 photos, 20 years apart, and a face the world still doesn't know how to talk about. Same name, same voice, same talent. But the face looking back at you is so different that if you didn't know better, you'd swear it was 2 different people. And every time, the conversation goes to the same place. Surgery, skin, choices, motives. People pick a side. They argue about what Michael wanted, what Michael hated, what Michael was running from. And the argument never resolves, because the argument is about the wrong thing. The real question isn't why Michael Jackson changed his face. The real question is why the person staring back at him in the mirror was never good enough, no matter what version he was looking at. Let's do an icon recall. If you watched our first episode, you know the story of Michael's perfectionism, how the need to be flawless drove his art and destroyed his peace. This episode is about something different, something that uses the same engine but points it in a darker direction. This is about identity. What happens when you start editing yourself so slowly, so gradually, that by the time you realize how far you've drifted, you can't find your way back to who you were? And what makes Michael's story so important isn't that it's extreme, it's that it isn't. Not really. The mechanism behind what happened to him is the same mechanism running quietly in almost every person watching this video right now. He just had the money, the fame, and the isolation to take it further than most of us ever will. To understand what happened, you have to go back to what Michael saw when he looked at himself as a child. By every external measure, young Michael Jackson was extraordinary. He could out-sing adults at 6 years old. He could out-dance professionals by 8. By 11, he was leading one of the biggest groups in America. The world saw a prodigy, a miracle. A kid whose talent was so overwhelming that it made everything else irrelevant. But inside the Jackson household, the message was different. According to Michael, his father Joe didn't just critique his performing, he critiqued him, his appearance, his features, the way he looked. Michael described in multiple interviews over the years a childhood in which his own father made fun of his nose, called him ugly, and compared his looks unfavorably to his brothers. Whether Joe Jackson meant it as motivation, humor, or cruelty doesn't really matter at this point. What matters is what it did to the kid receiving it. Because here's what happens when a child is told their appearance is wrong by the first authority figure in their life. The child doesn't question the authority. The child questions themselves. And if that child happens to be performing in front of millions of people who are screaming their name, the contradiction becomes unbearable. The world says, "You're incredible." Your father says your face is wrong. Both of those things can't be true. And yet, for Michael, they lived side by side for his entire childhood. That contradiction planted something in Michael's brain that no amount of applause could uproot. The belief that he was talented and defective at the same time. That the thing the world loved about him and the thing that was wrong with him were somehow both true. And for a while, it didn't matter, because the talent was so overwhelming that it drowned everything else out. Watch Michael during the off-the-wall era, 1979. He's 20 years old. The album is a masterpiece of joy. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With You, She's Out of My Life. And the Michael Jackson you see in that period looks like someone who, for a brief window, is actually enjoying what's happening to him. The afro is full. The smile is genuine. The dancing feels loose and playful, like his body is a place he wants to be. He's present. He's inhabited. He looks, for lack of a better word, like himself. Then came Thriller. And with Thriller came a level of visibility so intense that his face was no longer just his face. It became public property. Cameras, tabloids, magazine covers. Every angle available for public consumption, public critique, public opinion. For someone who already believed his appearance was flawed, suddenly the entire world was invited to weigh in, and the editing began. The first rhinoplasty reportedly happened around 1979. Michael said publicly that he'd broken his nose during a dance rehearsal and needed corrective surgery. Then came a second procedure, then a third. The chin changed, the cheekbones shifted. Over the years, the face on screen drifted further and further from the face that had appeared on the Jackson 5's first album cover. And here's where the conversation usually goes wrong. People reduce what happened to a binary. He wanted to look different, or he had vitiligo, as if those two things cancel each other out. The truth is more uncomfortable than either option, because both things were real. Michael did have vitiligo. He spoke about it publicly with Oprah in 1993. It's a condition where the skin loses pigment in patches, creating an uneven appearance that, for someone under the most intense visual scrutiny in entertainment history, would have been psychologically devastating on its own. Some of the changes in his skin were the result of depigmentation treatment to even out the patches. That part is medical. That part deserves to be understood on its own terms. But the cosmetic procedures seemed to move on a separate track, and from the outside, they appeared to have a direction, a trajectory, away from the original. Whether Michael was fully conscious of what that trajectory meant or not, the cumulative effect was unmistakable. The face the world watched change looked less and less like the one he started with. And each adjustment made the next one feel more necessary, because each adjustment created a new gap between what he saw and what he wanted to see. That is the treadmill of self-editing, and it works the same way whether you're altering your face, your personality, your values, or your identity. Each edit doesn't feel like much on its own, but each edit changes the baseline. And once the baseline shifts, the original becomes harder to find, then harder to remember, then harder to want. But the treadmill wasn't done with him yet. Watch the footage and it's hard not to notice a shift. The Jackson 5 version of Michael feels loose, playful, almost weightless. He's inside his body, moving with it, responding to the music like the music is moving through him, not being performed by him. The later version of Michael feels different, still brilliant, still mesmerizing. Every move technically perfect, but controlled, deliberate, precise. Less like someone dancing, and more like someone executing choreography from a blueprint. The spontaneity had been replaced by architecture. You could argue that's just maturity. Artists evolve, dancers refine. That's fair. But when you lay it alongside everything else, the surgeries, the skin treatments, the increasingly controlled public image, a pattern emerges. A person who used to live inside himself was now managing himself from the outside, like a building he was constantly renovating, but never actually occupying. But self-editing is dangerous enough in private. Michael had to do it in front of the whole world, and the world didn't help. This is the part that never gets enough attention, because what happened to Michael's face happened in public, in real time, on magazine covers, in tabloids, on late-night television. And the world responded not with compassion, but with comedy, the jokes, the impressions, the before and after photos treated like entertainment. Every comedian who did a Michael Jackson face bit was reinforcing the exact thing that was destroying him. The idea that his appearance was the most interesting and most wrong thing about him. The world told Michael his face was wrong when he was a child. Then it told him his face was wrong again when he tried to change it. It seemed like there was no version of his appearance the public was willing to let him have in peace. The conversation was never going to let him win, because the conversation was never really about Michael. It was about what made other people comfortable. And in the middle of all this, there was Neverland. Michael built a private amusement park on his ranch, roller coasters, a zoo, a movie theater. The media treated it as eccentricity. But through the lens of everything else, Neverland starts to look like the same mechanism pointed in a different direction. If the surgeries were an attempt to edit the present, Neverland was an attempt to edit the past, to build the childhood that perfectionism and fame had stolen from him. but you can't engineer innocence any more than you can engineer a face. And so Neverland became another beautiful thing that wasn't quite enough. And the deeper you look, the more the pattern reveals itself. Because what Michael did to his face, his childhood, his environment, and his public image all follow the same logic. Something is wrong, I can fix it. The fix creates a new problem. That problem requires another fix. And the cycle doesn't stop because it's powered by a belief buried so deep that no external change can touch it. The belief that who you are, before all the edits, isn't good enough to be loved. Here's why this matters to you. Most people never notice the moment they start editing themselves. It happens slowly. A laugh you adjust because someone told you it was too loud. An opinion you stop sharing because it made a room uncomfortable once. An interest you quietly drop because it didn't match the identity people expected of you. A way of dressing, talking, thinking that you gradually replace with something more acceptable, more palatable, more safe. None of those edits feel like much on their own. They feel practical, they feel mature, they feel like adapting, and sometimes they are. Sometimes you're growing, sometimes you're becoming more of yourself, not less. But sometimes you're not. Sometimes you look up after 10 years of small adjustments and realize the person everyone knows isn't the person you started as. The edited version has become so familiar that it feels more real than the original. You've been performing yourself so long that you've forgotten there was ever a version that didn't need a performance. And the hardest part is that the edited version often works better. People reward it, they tell you they like this version. So going back to the original starts to feel like a risk nobody asked you to take. Michael Jackson lived that trap at a scale most of us can barely imagine. But the trap itself isn't rare. It's one of the most common experiences of being human. The quiet, gradual replacement of who you are with who you think you need to be. And the final chapter is the hardest to hear. By the end of his life, Michael Jackson existed at such a distance from his starting point that the distance itself had become its own kind of prison. The kid from Gary, Indiana was still in there. You could hear him in the music. You could see him in the moments on stage when the choreography cracked and something real slipped through. But he was buried under decades of adjustments, corrections, procedures, and performances. Layer after layer of editing, each one designed to fix the thing that was never actually broken. Millions loved Michael Jackson, every version of him, but public love was never the same as safety inside himself. And maybe that's the tragedy. He never fully believed he was lovable without becoming someone else, because the first person who should have told him that told him the opposite. And that voice was louder than all the applause in the world. Michael Jackson didn't lose himself in one dramatic moment. He lost himself in 1,000 tiny edits. And that's what makes the story uncomfortable, because that's how most of us do it too. If this changed how you see Michael Jackson, let me know in the comments. And if there's another icon you want remembered this way, not just for what they achieved, but for what it cost them, drop their name below. This is Recall Icon. Thank you for watching.